But as always, it's wonderful to have Cantor Shifman with us. And great to have everyone here. And if we do need chairs, we can grab some extra chairs here if anyone needs. Thank you again to Kenny for sponsoring this in memory of Yael, and wonderful. And I know a testament to your many years here and so many people who are excited to learn together with you. So it's a pleasure to turn it over to Cantor Shifman.
Thank you, Eric. So before we get started, I'd like to dedicate again the class to Yael but Abram Yaakov. It's very apropos that we're doing that tonight, because tonight is going to be all about the soul. And then we're going to have a second lecture next week on Tuesday night, which will be a continuum focusing about Kaddish. What is actually Kaddish all about? Laws of mourning, Shiva homes, things that I think will be very appropriate, but it all ties essentially back to the same starting point, which is the soul. Our rabbis suggest to always warm up a crowd. You ever notice a rabbi tells a joke before a sermon? No, it's true. You notice it, right? Can't always verify that it's a good joke, but it's a good attempt at a joke. But there's some teaching that is like just to get the crowd a little bit relaxed. So I hi to everybody on Zoom, first of all. Erev Tov. So the gentleman, nice, fine Jewish man, plays a lottery. And essentially all you have to do is pick one number between 1 and 100. And you pick the number and you win the lottery. Lo and behold, he picks the number and he wins the lottery. So his friend is amazed. How did you do it? Do you have a system? Is there a strategy? Did you pick a number out of a hat? He says to him, I'll be honest with you. I do have a bit of a Jewish education in Judaics, and I also have mazel. So he says, well, could you explain yourself further? Because I would like to win myself. I'd like to know what strategy you employed, and I'd like to see if I could win the next time there's a lottery. So he says that the number 7 in Judaism is a Kabbalistic number. It's a very complete number. 7 days of the week, 7 cycles of counting of the Omer, the sabbatical years in the 7th year, and then numerous examples. So I took that number and I said, why don't I take that number and I'll square it? So his friend looks at him and he scratches his head. He said, I don't get it. He says, what do you mean? He said, well, the winning number was 48, not 49. He says, that's where my mazel comes in. I'm bad at math. All right, Erev Tov, everyone. I think this is a very powerful subject that we all are very intrigued. And we use this term about souls very often. And many of you come to Minyan in the memory of a loved one and dedicate mitzvot and deeds of a loved one. So there is rabbinic teaching to the value of a soul that far exceeds the human body. So we're going to explore a number of different issues tonight, and hopefully we'll learn together and come with a little bit of a different understanding to maybe how we recognize the soul operates. So God created humanity to populate the world. God gave us intellect and wisdom to enhance the product, but ultimately to channel our focus toward the worshiping and connectivity of God. Using all of our tools to better one another and to live harmoniously within the desire of God. God created us with a highly functionable body. The nature of the body is to fulfill its needs and wants. Within our 5 senses, our constant willpower is being challenged to facilitate to whatever the body craves and whatever the body needs. Unfortunately, craving within our body and giving into our desires leads to conflict within the body and what we know to be the soul. To remedy the physical pleasures of the body, God imbued us with a holy soul, imbued within each of one of us. In tonight's discussion, we will attempt to understand what is the soul, what is its core function, how does it interact within the physical body, where is that soul actually located. We will be using a number of rabbinic sources from Kabbalistic works of the famous great Rabbi Chaim Luzzatto, known as the Ramchal. He was an Italian rabbi in the 17th century. He addresses this in great detail, some Talmudic sources and some Hasidic sources. Every morning when we wake up, the first prayer we make is Modeh Ani. Modeh Ani lefanecha. We give praise and thanks to God that we've woken up. And the key tag phrase that I want to focus there is Shehechazarta bi nishmati. You've given me back my soul. Bechem la rabba. You've given it in kindness and in truth because you have faith in us. What's beautiful about our religion is every day we have a reset. I know we highlight this point during Yom Kippur about repentance, and we get to have a new year, but each and every day is an opportunity for a reset. Matter of fact, furthermore, each and every prayer is an opportunity for a reset. During the day when we daven Shachrit, Mincha, Mariv, no three prayers are alike. Each prayer stands on its own. Sometimes you can talk to a person and say, I didn't have a good experience davening. The beauty is you get to come back a few hours later. And much credit to this synagogue that they offer that opportunity twice a day. It's really a great tribute to B'nai Yeshurun all these years after the fact that you can hold a minyan twice a day. It's not the case in the city, and certainly not nationally in conservative synagogues. You can ask around. It's really in the minority that you see it that often. Very early on in the book of Genesis, when God creates Adam, you'll see it in chapter 2, verse 7. After he's made the body, it says, and God blew into Adam's nostrils a living soul. So the body was already created, and he blows into him the soul. This is after his body was fully created and perfected. The soul is pure, but the body is tainted. As part of our morning blessings, also, we make another prayer right before the morning prayers. If you look before the morning blessings, which are 15 blessings we make every morning, we do another one called Elokai Neshama. You make another prayer about this holy soul that you gave to me. God has given me a soul with purity. You have made it and fashioned it. You safeguard my soul and eventually will restore it and take it away when we pass away physically, but will restore it in the future. We are grateful for the master of the universe and creator of the universe. And lastly, we recognize that the soul will be restored to our dead bodies. We also have another prayer that we do Slichot night, and again on Yom Kippur night, and that's Hanashama Lach. You'll notice in these three examples that I've cited to you, the soul is always mentioned before the body. And that's how our sages view the soul, because the soul has a continuum. It's infinite. Whereas, unfortunately, as we know, the body is not. Many times we find comfort when somebody passes away, that we use terms like the soul will be returned to its maker, he'll be reunited or she'll be reunited with their family. And we always say about somebody looking down upon us, we don't mean in a physical sense, but we mean in a spiritual sense. So the soul was created before the body, all of the souls. Matter of fact, there used to be a dating application. I'm not making this up, it's true. It's called I saw you at Sinai.com. And there's a belief that at Mount Sinai, all of the souls came down to witness the giving of the Torah. Those that were already within the people who were there stayed with them, and then the rest of them went back up. So the joke is, it's not the first time we're meeting. We may not know it. According to the tractate of Brachot, the Babylonian Talmud, I can't tell you how they come up with this formula, but this is what our sages say. When a person goes to sleep, it's considered 1/60th of death, which is why the custom is when you wake up, not just in the morning, people don't know this. When you wake up in the morning, you're supposed to wash your hands. Not just because you've touched possibly a body part that may be making you impure, but it's considered like you leave the cemetery. What happens when you leave the cemetery? You'll notice in each cemetery, there's a washing station because we've come into contact with the dead bodies. Therefore, each time we awaken in the morning, we recognize there's a miracle, which is the soul has been returned. There is a prayer which is not well known, but when you're supposed to say Shema at night when you go to sleep. Within the Shema, there is a segment which is a full confessional, almost like Ashamnu, similar verbiage without having to do Ashamnu. Why do we say that every night? Because there's no guarantee that you're going to wake up in the morning. Obviously, the optimum death, God forbid, when somebody has to go, you say it's to go in the sleep without any suffering. There's no guarantees. So we would like to come with a clean slate before God, knowing that we've asked for forgiveness. Now, we reference this idea of revival of the dead 3 times a day. Bonus points, anyone? I'll give you a clue. That's the blessing before Kedusha. V'chaye hametim, we say it every day. We give recognition to God that there is going to be a revival of the dead. And the belief is when the dead is revived, the original soul that was matched up to the body will be paired again with the body. So some people think it's a non-Jewish belief, but it's absolutely a core belief. It's part of our prayer about the revival of dead. This is why many people choose to buy plots in Israel for burial. And the reason is they believe that the revival of the dead is going to happen first in Israel. And this is a cute commentary I saw, but this is what the rabbis maintain. So what's going to happen to those buried in the diaspora? So these tunnels are going to open underground, and the bones are going to roll all the way to Israel, and then they'll actually be revived. I'm going to give you a couple of sources where some of the prophets actually got to witness it. We're going to talk a little bit more about the pairing of a soul, a little bit more in next session, because the belief is, I'm sure many of you have heard this expression before, where somebody says, you have an old soul. Have you heard that before? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily to an older person, to a younger person. So what does that mean when you say to somebody, you have an old soul? So some people will explain it to mean that you're mature beyond your years. But that's really not what it means. An old soul means that you've been around before. And I don't mean in a negative way. You've been around means you've lived. You've had life experience, but you've lived in a past lifetime. So conceptually what happens, and I'll go into more detail next week, is sometimes the soul doesn't fulfill its mission. And in order for the soul to fulfill its mission, it gets sent down again to another body. Now, the Kabbalists explain this. This is why sometimes we see, it's a very difficult concept, but this is how they explain it. Sometimes you don't see somebody living to their full years. the life expectancy. God forbid, infants, children die young, adults die young. They explain it to mean that the soul was brought down for a specific purpose. They have fulfilled their mandate within that body, and now they're ready to come back to the Creator. Obviously, in somebody's grief, nobody wants to hear that when you've lost somebody near and dear to you. But that's a mystical belief that the souls do make these appearances and come back. Unfortunately, it could happen multiple times. Now, the rabbis also suggest regarding a soul, it's very interesting. We don't have the time tonight, but if I would go around the room, I would ask you, do you have an affinity to a certain mitzvah? What speaks to you? And I'm not going to say what your parents taught you or your Sunday school teacher taught you. Certain mitzvot speak to people. Why is that? Because that's something your soul did elsewhere. Conversely, there are certain sins that a person has an affinity also, which means they were struggled with it in a previous lifetime, and now they have to try and make amends to get it right this time. So that's when we have what we call a Gilgul Neshama, where a soul comes back in a different form in somebody else's body. Now, Rabbi Dazuta makes a differentiation between the soul, the life force of animals, and living creatures, and mankind who function through instinct and feelings and intelligence. He makes a very interesting statement, and I'm sure you've heard this from many times of people that own pets. This is like a person. It's not a dog. It's not a cat. They know me. I can talk to them. They get me. I get them. We have a very close bond. So every divine item that God makes has a form of a soul. The difference is we're imbued with much more intelligence. The animals or inanimate objects which he speaks about that have souls, or grass or grains of sand, have limitations. We have an ability to really do amazing things. And as we know, the soul is transmitted through DNA and genetic material, these behavioral patterns are through DNA and through genetic materials and at conception. As the creation grows, these are all God's creations. Some of these properties as related to each species grow along with it. But once again, there are limitations with this species, unlike what a human being has. Now, I'm going to show you in a minute that there's more than one name for a soul, and there's actually 5 levels within the soul. So the soul, you may have heard of a term, we use it quite a bit in the liturgy. It's called nefesh. Years ago, when I first came here, every once in a while, we would do a psalm called Yedid Nefesh. Sometimes it's done at a wedding. It's a term used to describe the soul. So it's another level of the soul. There is a soul, which is the animalistic part of the soul, which all of us have. Everybody has that level, and it's very easily attainable. And it follows a natural characteristic of each person. Within each of our animal soul, we have our memory, our intelligence, imagination, and it helps to develop and impact all of our decision-making. The higher level of the soul is known as the divine soul. This is much different than the animal soul. The divine soul takes root and is binded to the highest elevations, which means obviously in heavens and to God. If one is able to tap into this level, he overcomes the animalistic side of a human being, and you live in a much more of a spiritual realm, and you're able to connect to God, benefiting both our physical and the soul which is in. The higher plane achieved will work its way down through the divine and animal soul. The 2 souls mentioned here are bound together according to Kabbalistic belief, yet again, I can't tell you how it works, through the blood, the person's blood. Blood is considered to be the lifeline. And it makes perfect sense when you think about it, because in Leviticus, we use an expression in the Torah. It says, Ki hadam hu hanefesh. The blood is the soul. The Torah refers to blood as the soul, and it calls it ki hu hanefesh, as we said, ki hadam hu hanefesh. Now, we're going to talk about these different levels of the soul in an ascending order. So the first level of the soul is going to be called simply nefesh, is the one I just described to you. The most basic element of the soul that everybody has. And you just go about as your core functioning, as your DNA, and you go about your day-to-day living. Second level, which you may have heard this word, is ruach. You ever hear of ruach? How would you explain ruach?
Spirit.
That's part of the number 2 level. That's the next highest level within the soul. The third level is the way we all know it, which is the Shama. Level number 4 is Chaya. These are all transcendental levels. 4 and 5 are the hardest levels to achieve. Chaya, which is the living essence. And Yechida, which is level number 5, which is almost unattainable unless you're on a tremendous level, which is basically you've conquered all of your inclinations, and you're able to connect with God in the highest level possible. Now, let's try explain a little bit about these subcategories that we've mentioned right now. So nefesh is existence, the way your heart beats, to be alive, how you walk around, how you breathe. This is just simply put your nefesh. Ruach is your feelings and your emotions. The Shama is a little bit of the higher level, which is the intellectual side and how you activate your thinking process. So you take your physical needs of your body and you combine them with the intellectual side of things. Now, the two transcendent levels, which is Chaya, this is actually the core purpose of your existence, and you're achieving your potential, your meaning of life. And Yechida, which is the highest level, is the actual connectivity to God. It's like the highest level. If you want to have another way to think of Yechida, think of it as like a docking station, where a ship has to dock. It gets all its electrical power, its gas, it's all its resources, and then it goes back out, but then eventually has to come back. I was in Columbus last weekend for Shabbat, and I enjoy going to one of the smaller synagogues. They got a very good rabbi there that really resonates with me. Maybe I knew him in another lifetime, I don't know. But he tells really very amazing stories, and I heard him say it, and it really helped me understand this, this idea. He tells of a story. One day, a young man, he's a grown man already, a rabbi, he bumps into his rabbi. And he says to his rabbi, I want to thank you. And he says, for what? He says, on account of you, I became a rabbi. Wow, that's amazing. I thank you. I'm very nice to know I touched somebody and I made a difference. He says, can you tell me a little bit more? I've had hundreds and thousands of students over the years. He was already an older man, the rabbi. He says, one day when we were in elementary school and you were my rabbi in my class, one of my classmates came to school and he was wearing a beautiful brand new watch. And I couldn't take my eyes off it. The bell rang and it came time for recess. And my friend took the watch off and he put it on the table because he didn't want to scratch it in the playground. I waited behind. And when everybody was out of the room, I took the watch and I put it in my pocket. Clearly, I didn't have a master plan what to do with it until I got out of school, but I had it in my pocket. The bell rings again to end the recess. And my friend comes in and he goes to his desk and he's looking and he can't find the watch. He looks above, he looks below, he looks behind his chair, starts to break out crying. He's hysterical. It was a family gift and now it's gone. The rabbi, you saw him crying and you asked him what was going on and he explained, somebody took my watch. So the rabbi said, before I continue with a master class, my class plan, excuse me, all of you have to line up in the back of the room and I'm going to search each and every one of you. In order not to embarrass the student that has taken the watch, each one of you will have your eyes closed. So they all get up and the young man said, my heart was pounding in my chest. I knew I'm going to be busted. There's nothing I could do. He goes one by one. He eventually comes to me. I feel his hand in my pocket. He takes out the watch. He says, make sure all of your eyes are still closed. And he puts the watch back on the table where the young man was originally, his table. I will never forget that you didn't embarrass me in front of the whole class. But secondly, well beyond that class, in any time of the year, you never sat me down, you never told my parents, you never said a word to me about what happened. And the rabbi looks at him, says, like there's almost no recognition. He says, don't you remember the story? He says, I do remember it. He says, but don't you remember that was me? And the rabbi says, I didn't know it was you who took it. And the rabbi said, how is it possible? He says, I myself had my eyes closed. And I thought that was a beautiful story. And that's essentially what the neshama was. I was thinking of that and it just hit me. This is what the neshama wants. It doesn't want to judge us as a physical entity. The neshama wants to work with us in a partnership. It has its holy entity, which is God. And it doesn't want to judge the human body. Wants to be like the rabbi with its eyes closed, but except in this case, neshama has to have its eyes open all the time. So what is the neshama's objective? Let's take an example of a couple musicians playing music. One can just be playing musical notes of a score. The other person can play exactly the same score, but you can feel emotion. You can feel a connection to him. You can feel he's putting his heart, her heart and soul into it. This idea is very true of numerous situations. In my line of work, where I had the privilege of being a Cantor here for 24 years. Thank you. Thank you. That's very nice. Thank you.
I think
So
you
you
gotta
can get up. You can get up and sing in front of people. And it can be words on the page, it can be a melody. Or somebody else can get up and just sing notes. They're not connecting to the words at all. And they're just going through the motions. Sometimes you heard somebody speak to you, or you heard a politician, without getting political right now. We're not going to say from what party. Or a guest speaker. And you just say it's lip service. I don't believe a word what they're saying. They're saying the right things, but what do you say? Felt and neshama, right? That something is missing there. Or what my father would say, felt zacher, if you speak a little Yiddish, Bob would translate for us, felt zacher bisso salz and pfeffer. Everyone familiar with that? It's missing a little salt and pepper on a dish. There's no feeling. This is what the neshama does. The neshama has to create within us an emotion. When we daven, when we speak, the way we behave, the neshama is fighting an eternal battle within, a struggle to bring us to the highest level. And the soul has this mission every single day to desperately fight along, desperately fight with the body. In Hasidism, every action is geared toward to unite the different levels of these 5 levels of the soul as best as we can attain them and to bring them together. Now, we all have peaks and valleys. Nobody can stay at a certain height. That's just the nature. Otherwise, you wouldn't have repentance. and we all would be tzaddikim. And that's just the nature. We fall, we get up, we fall, we get up. But we try as best as we can to combine all these different levels in worship of gods. It says in the Torah in Leviticus, Kadoshim Tiyu, you got to be holy. This is a very high level. Think of the soul, as I said, it's in the highest level of Yechida. So not everybody has the knowledge or the brain power or the intellect, but a person has the ability to, within themselves, tap into their potential. And that's what God wants from us. God's not going to sit you in a straight row and say, you know, you didn't achieve as much as him or as her. Did you achieve as much as you could have? And that's when you're able to tap into your essence. And we use this term very loosely, be a difference maker, inspire people around you. Then you're tapping into these forces within the neshama. Now, in regards to the souls of animals and plants, these inanimate objects are also included, even as I mentioned, the blade of grass and even the grain of sand. Anything and everything that God created has a form of holiness. A soul is not just the engine of life, but also embodies of the why and how things exist, and the meaning or purpose of why God designed each and one of us. We have the freedom to make choices and can weigh each decision with a faculty of intellect as best as you can to see if you're going to see. What do we say in the Pirkei Avot? Who's a wise man? One who can see the outcome of their decision before they make it. That's what you call a chacham. You know you're going to make a decision and there's going to be ramifications. And it's a good decision or a bad, but sometimes there is an unknown element. Each soul is provided with a compass and a guidebook to navigate the challenges of the physical body and has the resources to try to fortify it. Upon doing a mitzvah and good deeds, it elevates each soul within us. We partner with God in spreading the message. It says in the text, Yagdil Torah ve'yadir. You have to perpetuate the Torah. You have to bring it out to the world. You can't sit there and be more of a hands-off person and say, who am I after all to make a difference or tell somebody what they should do? Each and every one of us should do as much as we can, hopefully inspiring people. Now, after life, we'll spend a little bit more time next week talking about how the body and the soul separate, but the body does separate from the soul to a purely spiritual world. It can no longer do mitzvot and returns home. However, consider the analogy of planting a tree or planting seeds, and sometimes you don't see the outcome till much later on. With that in mind, there is the soul can get some benefit from things that they have done and come to fruition later on. Like this young man I told you in the story. Look, he became a rabbi because of his rabbi. We each individually, when you donate something in honor of a deceased person, are elevating that soul. When you say Kaddish, you have an opportunity to elevate each and every soul. We believe that they're able to transcend. There's all different levels in heaven. That's another lecture for a different time. But there are levels, and you can continue to elevate the souls as they return back to the resting place. God created us with the 5 senses in life, and we have all experienced some kind of intuition. Sometimes you're walking around and you get a thought, and you can't explain it. And you say to somebody, how did you know? I just knew. How do you explain that? So I would like to suggest to you that's your soul talking. You get an intuition, and you know you have to do something and you want to do something. And it's not because somebody told you to do it. Your soul is communicating to you. The problem becomes God created us also with an evil inclination. Now, the Yetzer Hara, as it's called, the evil inclination, has many strategies to bring us down. We live in a very cold climate, and Bob's waiting for you at the Minion with everybody else. There's a lot of snow on the ground. So, yeah, I'm gonna sleep in this morning. I'll have a cup of coffee. I'm not gonna drive to the. No, I want to put my tefillin on. Yeah, I can wait a different time. The soul has all strategies. The evil inclination knows each person where it's embedded, and you sometimes hear that voice. So you got to discern what you're hearing in your head. I don't want us to make sound like we're crazy, we're hearing voices in our head, but there are that speak to us. And one has to discern between what the evil inclination is doing as opposed to something positive. You'll sometimes, I remember many times I come to the Minion and I'd go to somebody in the back of the room and I'd say, do you have a yard site this morning? Are you here to say Kaddish? No. You have a life cycle? No. Well, what brings you to Shul? I don't mean it in a negative way. We don't see you very often. You could take that in a negative way also. I'm finally here and you're making me feel guilty. Right? But you say to the person, why are you here? I said, I just felt I had to come. Now we see this more around tragedies, right? People start to want to come, they want to do something. But when you have something really driving you and pushing you, or you have this intuition, that is the soul within you. If it's not something that has a negative connotation. Because it can also drive you to do all kinds of things. And the evil inclination is so good that it gives you it rationalizes for you. So the next thing you know, not only is it not a bad thing I'm about to do, it's a mitzvah. That's what the inclination does. So you really got to separate from the noise and really listen to what you're hearing intuitively inside your head as you're hearing it. So how do we get connectivity to the soul? So there was a very famous Hasidic rabbi, you may have heard of him. His name was Reb Nachman from Breslov in the Ukraine. His great-grandfather was the original founder of Hasidism. And he promotes a number of his readings. Unfortunately, he died at a very young age. He was only 38, but he was a prolific writer. And he would say all the time, after you're done with davening, go to the forest, go outside, go to the trees, and meditate. Block out all of the noise in your head, block out all the riffraff, and you go one step further, and he says, talk to God like God is your friend, whatever your mother tongue is, whatever language you speak, and have a conversation. Now, most people aren't going to be very comfortable with that. Now, I will tell you, you don't have to worry so much nowadays with the Bluetooth. You can walk around as you're going for a walk and talk to God. Put in a little thing in your ear, like and somebody will think you're on the phone. 20 years ago, you'd look at somebody as a meshuggah in the sky. It's having a full-fledged conversation. But you can do it as you're walking, as you're sitting out in your garden, and have a conversation. Connect. Talk to God. And by doing that, you're going to elevate and inspire and light a fire within yourself. Because then you're getting away from all of the noise. We're surrounded continuously with social media, our smartphones, our smart pads, our smart TVs, our smart cars, everything's smart but us. Everything around us is more and more smart, but to the point where I'm guilty of this also. But imagine you see somebody's panic when they can't find the phone for a minute. Absolute panic. You're thinking incoming missiles coming into your house. You gotta get to the bomb shelter. You don't get into such a panic when you don't have your device. And we've lost that ability to connect. I'll never forget, it was one of my early years at BJ. It was high holidays around the World Series. And I looked, did a double take. My vision was a little better then than it is now. So I had pretty good vision back then. And I looked at a guy, And I saw he had an earpiece. He was tied into the transistor radio, listening to the World Series at the same time as davening. But I'm very sorry. That's not exactly how you're going to connect on Yom Kippur night to God. The holiest night of the day, hearing what the pitch count is and how far along the team is. You don't know how to turn all of that away. And that's why it's so important to go out, experience, and just separate. And there, the rabbis would meditate for hours. It says in the Talmud, a tractate in Brachot, before davening, the very pious rabbis would meditate for a full hour. They would daven for an hour and meditate again a third hour. And they would do this 3 times a day. Now, you may say, well, they didn't have much to do back then. But that's a very high level. Most of the time when we go to a minyan or to a class to learn, you're coming on the fly. Come right from work, you're coming right from home, you go right into it. One of the reasons we're told that you have to have a permanent seat in the minyan. You know, some people get offended. You go to the chapel, I'm not looking, no, I'm not naming names, it's all over. I've seen it in all my years as a Jew. Go sit in your seat, somebody comes to you. Excuse me, that's my seat. Now, I want to tell you, it's not just somebody claiming ownership to a piece of real estate in the congregation. The rabbis actually say you should have your own seat. It should be a makom kavua, a permanent place. And one of the reasons I suggest that is because you're going to get connectivity right away. As soon as you get into routine, you sit in the seat that you're comfortable in, that's going to allow you to pray better. Now, I cannot tell you that that person that kicks you out of the seat has that mind thought. He's more and more upset that, how dare you? Do you know it's mine? I've been here in this building since, I've been in that chair since this building opened. And there's a way to do it, of course, also. I'll tell you that my father one time was telling me he visited Surfside. I was telling Barry and Paul and Rich last night, there's a young Israel there, and he saw an empty seat. He went to sit down, a guy tapped him on the shoulder. Sorry, sir, you can't sit there. My dad said, why? He said, it's Jared Kushner's seat. So my dad said, excuse me, I'll get up and sit somewhere else. Jared Kushner is the president's son-in-law, just in case, just for full disclosure. But the point is, you can get into a routine. Some people like to wear a suit and yarmulke. You wear a suit and yarmulke, you get into a routine, it allows you to make much better connectivity. And it's okay to ask for your seat, but just in a very pleasant and nice way. You know, whenever I go to another shul, I'll ask respectfully when I go into a row, is this somebody's seat? And it has nothing to do with endowed seats because you paid extra. It's just somebody's seat who's a regular. And in my opinion, somebody that is a regular deserves to have a set seat. That's the reward for coming all the time. Not to mention the reward for being with a nice group of people and davening with a minyan. I recently heard a lecture from a Rabbi Simon Jacobson, very good speaker. And he says over 15 years ago, he received a phone call from Kirk Douglas's editor. Everyone remember Kirk Douglas?
Sure. Spartacus.
That's right, Spartacus. Famous actor. And she went on to say that she was helping him write his book. He wrote a book called, if you have a chance, supposed to be a fascinating read, called Climbing the Mountain. As you know, in his latter years, he suffered a stroke and he became incapacitated to the point where he couldn't function. He needed help with everything that he was doing. He couldn't, the mind was telling him what he wanted to do, but the body wasn't cooperating. And he had these bouts of just crying all the time, bursting out crying, and he couldn't control himself. This same rabbi who I'm quoting wrote a book called Toward a Meaningful Life. And you know, Kirk Douglas, as you know, was Jewish. And somebody gave him a copy of the rabbi's book. And he said, reading this book may help you deal with your hardships. When he finished writing his own book, he quotes the rabbi in his book. And he said, what a difference make. And the rabbi speaks about this concept, which we spoke about, this crying, this yearning. We talk about this crying. He says to him, essentially, that your soul crying. You need to do more for me. Yes, there's some people that have a depression, but sometimes you ever say to someone, why are you crying? They say, I don't know. I just have this moment of sadness. I just got to cry. Now, you may ask what the trigger was. Did you see a lost relative's picture? Is it a holiday that triggered it? But even then, when you don't have a trigger, you feel this immense melancholy inside of you, this immense sadness. He maintains in his book, as what I've just mentioned earlier, that it's another way that your soul is telling you, you need to do more for me. You know, people invest a lot of money in their bodies, right? There's a whole field out there with plastic surgery and working out and using all kind of creams, but they don't invest the same for their spiritual side. I remember I had nothing to lose at the time when we get a call from my executive director. It was around retention time, right around now, if I'm correct. You should be getting statements anytime if things have not changed as the way I remember, right around now. Asking you to up your dues again. And sometimes somebody would say, we're resigning. So we were the last line of defense, so we get a call inevitably. And I'd call them up and I'd say to them, you know, what's going on? Is there something I can do to change your mind? First of all, I want to know it wasn't me first. No, it's not you. You're fine. You're this, you're that, you know, all these adjectives and whatever not. And I'll say, well, what's going on? Well, our kids are out of the house. We're going to take a break. I said, what does that mean, take a break? I figure they got one door out. I could start challenging them. 1 foot out the door. Yeah, we're going to take a break and we'll come back. And you know, once they do that, they're out. There's no such thing as taking a break. It's an endeavor that's 365 days a year. And you have to put the time in. There's no such thing. Which is what I said to them. And I said, furthermore, what message do you send to your children? If you can leave a shul where you were members for decades, why should your child go to a shul when they grow up? You want to show them, my kids are not in religious school, they're all bar bat mitzvah, they're married and still I come to the shul. That's what you want to send them. So sometimes it would go over well, and sometimes I hear you, Cantor, it's a nice message, we'll think about it. And that was the last time when we thought about it. Unfortunately, some of the same people you still see around high holidays, when they're no longer members, you know, and they can walk into a building. But it's really sad because there's no such thing as taking a break from God, and there's no such thing as not putting forth, you know, the effort. Very interesting prayer Friday night. Right before you do the Amidah, it's a prayer of Vishamru. Are you familiar with the Vishamru? You hear it Friday night, you hear it Saturday morning. I'll go back into my memory. Vishamru, Vishamru, V'nei Yisrael, Vishamru, V'nei. And I'm sure you got maybe a couple of different versions that you sing now, since I'm no longer here. They're all good. Good, because it speaks to the text. And the last text, the last part of the phrase I want to bring to your attention is, Yom HaShvi'i, on the seventh day, Shabbat Vayinafash. What's that mean, Shabbat Vayinafash? On the Sabbath, and he rested. So Shabbat means, we know it means to rest. I want to tell you that Vayinafash, within the real root of the word, has the word nefesh. We're told on the Sabbath that we get a second soul. It's called Neshama Yetera. We get two souls. Our actual soul plus a secondary soul because of the holiness of the day. Comes Friday night, it spends Shabbat with you, and then it goes back to its source. The famous Kabbalistic rabbi, the Ari, had special meditations in different parts of the service. And he would say them as he thought about the soul coming in. But the Sabbath is a holy day, not just to get into your hammock and read your favorite book. It's to study, to enjoy song, to eat foods that you don't have during the week. And interesting to note, one of the reasons that Saturday night when you do the Havdalah, you smell the spices. One of the reasons given is your body is depressed. You're about to lose the soul. We know about the power of aromatherapy, right? You ever smell something and you feel better right away? Or it just makes you feel good? It's a whole industry unto itself, right? All these different spices and aroma, lavender and all these different things and fresheners makes you feel good. So you smell this and it kind of infuses you that you're okay to let go of your neshama yatero. I will tell you, we'll talk about it next week, that unfortunately, when a person doesn't behave the way they ought to, and they don't repent in this world, there's a reckoning, a day of judgment. In your day of judgment, we're told, it says in the Talmud, even the walls that you were in will testify against you. The wall, something inanimate, but God shows you your whole life. And God shows you where you did wrong, where you didn't repent. And sometimes it's not good enough just to say, I'm sorry. So there's a part of a cleansing process for the soul. It has to go to another part, which is not heaven. The Jewish belief, believe it or not. People think it's a Christian belief, but it's not. We're told the one day a week where the soul gets a reprieve and doesn't get punished is Shabbos. So now you wonder why some communities finish Shabbat in synagogues much later. Some people can't wait, and I'm guilty. I got to get to my phone. It's like somebody that smokes and doesn't have the cigarette for 24 hours. Now you got to get to your phone. You got to run and see the news. So we're told that they wait and take Shabbos out longer. The longer you take Shabbos out, the better for the souls. Now, not every soul goes through that process. Some, God gives them a pat on the back. You did good. But some, we get to a point where it's so wicked that unfortunately they got to go through this process. And that's one of the reasons why we take out the Shabbos later. Now, several reasons why we're given this extra soul on Shabbat. Famous commentator Rashi says that you're given this enhanced capacity to have serenity and joy on Shabbat. It also allows us to enjoy the special Shabbat food. You ever hear somebody say Shabbat food tastes like something like other than the rest of the week? That's because there's a special blessing to the food. Rabbi Hoyada quotes the famous, bless you. Rabbi Hoyada quotes a famous Kabbalistic rabbi, the Ari, who says, the extra soul provides the crown light which each Jew received at Mount Sinai. And then when the golden calf was brought, we lost those crown lights. But on Shabbat, we're given them in a spiritual sense. Another commentator, the Shita Mekubetzet, says on Shabbat, the extra soul provides a person with a divine flow to learn Torah and understand God's actions. Most sages agree that on Yom Tov and on Shabbat, you have this extra soul. Now, if you ever go to Safad, beautiful mystical city, the Ari, who I've quoted a number of times, has a small synagogue there, and he also has a mikvah. Freezing cold, probably like 50 degrees or 45. It's really cold. The saving grace is usually somebody's on the outside selling tea. You get a nice warm up with a nice cup of hot tea. A story is told about the Ari, who is a mystic rabbi who had barely slept. On Shabbat day, he did sleep. So one day, his student, who tried to watch and emulate all of his behaviors, saw him sleeping, and he noticed while he's sleeping, he's moving his lips. He's talking. He says, I want to hear what the great rabbi is saying. So he goes all the way up to him, and he drops his ear near his mouth. And the rabbi wakes up startled, like, what are you doing? Almost like, get away from me. Like, what are you doing? He says, I heard you speaking. I wanted to hear what it's about. So the Ari told him that when he sleeps, his soul goes up to heaven. They learn Torah in heaven, by the way. There's different academies. All the great rabbis and mystics have their own learning academies. And he's allowed to go to anyone that he chooses. So his disciple asked him, can you tell us what you learned today? He said, I can't even begin to explain. It's on such a lofty, lofty level. So the question becomes, what happens to the soul? And we believe that it does separate during our sleep. It's not within us. It separates to some lofty area. It gets kind of a renewal because we can't give it as a body, but it can get it from there. And then it does come back to the human body, as we see that the Ari was able to do this. Now, this idea of revival of the dead sounds like a very strange concept, doesn't it? But we have to believe that there's a greater purpose in our existence. So we have a number of instances in the prophets where we see that prophets themselves were able to revive the dead. We see a case with Elijah. Elijah was, the king wanted to kill him. The king was worshiping idols at the time he lived. Elijah put a curse on the land that there should be a famine. And there was a woman, a widower who didn't have much, gave him a room, and she protected him, hid him. We're told one day that her son got sick and he passed away, and Elijah brought him back. He had no pulse, resurrected him. They brought him back from the dead. When Elijah left this world, we're told, you can see in the book of Kings, his primary disciple was Elisha. And he wouldn't leave his rabbi's side. And he wanted to be blessed. He was going to get the mantle from his teacher. Elijah was going to give it to Elisha. He says to him, if you are worthy to see me leave this world, then I'll give you anything you want. He says, I want twice the blessing that you had. We're told that they crossed the river together, and a very dramatic scene happens where a chariot of fire comes down from heaven, and Elijah is one of the few people that are taken alive. He's not buried. You can go anywhere in Israel and you're not going to find a grave for him, which is why you'll see throughout the Talmud, Elijah comes back in different forms and disguises, and he learns with a number of rabbis throughout history. So how did this pay out that he had twice the blessing of his teacher? One instance is where a king of Jordan had leprosy, and we're told when you're in a state of leprosy, it's almost as though you're dead. And he was able to cure the man. Told him to go to a certain river, to dip in the river. He prayed on his behalf, and he was no longer a leper. The more dramatic story, we're told, is that he would travel. As you know, the job of a prophet was to go around all around Israel and to speak the word of God. And when you come through a certain town, we know women have a certain intuition that men don't have. And she looked at him immediately and said, this is a very godly man, holy man. Let's give him a place to stay. And he had a room. Every time he came through the house, he had a room. It so happened to be that it was Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is an opportune time to make your prayers and beseech God. And Elisha sends his servant, his emissary to her, and he says, ask her whatever she wants, I'll pray for her. She's shown us, she's very gracious and kind to me. I don't need anything. He says, no, you must have something you need. I'm going to do it for you. Your husband's a little bit older and you're already past child rearing yours. 1 year from now, you're going to have a child, a boy. Lo and behold, we're told a year later, the boy is born. And as the boy got older, he'd go out to the fields with his father and he'd watch him work the fields. It so happens that one of the days he went, he got a heat stroke and he started complaining of an intense headache. And the father didn't know what to do. He said, take him home to his mother. The boy died in his mother's hands. So she's very upset, of course, as you can imagine. And she goes to find Elisha. And Elisha wants to send back his servant to take his stick and just put it across his face. She says, I want you to do it. I never asked for a child, you gave it to me. The death is worse than if I never had a child to begin with. And we're told that he went in the room and he closed the door. It says in the prophets, verbatim, and he lay directly on top of him, hand to hand, feet to feet, mouth to mouth, and he breathed in him, and he brought him back from the dead. Now, the most dramatic story we see regarding the dead and the souls, it happens to be with Ezekiel. On Pesach, we read a very, very amazing Haftorah. It's called the Valley of the Dry Bones. God takes him to the mouth of a valley, and we see by the valley that there's all kind of bones over there. And we see within those bones, they're scattered all over. God says to Ezekiel, command them, you're to get up. And he quotes exactly what happens. A huge noise starts to happen. The bones start snapping together, joints, one by one. One by one, joint by joint, sinew by sinew, flesh comes on, and last but not least, he breathes inside of them God's breath. Now, who are these people that they resurrected? So if you go back into the book of Exodus, you'll see that the tribe of Ephraim left early and went into Israel without permission. They were only allowed to go to Israel when Moses said it was time. Ultimately, Joshua led them in. They went ahead on their own, and they basically got slaughtered by the Philistines. Another commentary says these same people that you see in the valley are Babylonians. When they murdered them, when they conquered Israel, they murdered a lot of Jews. Third opinion would be that people that don't believe in the revival of dead, God wanted to show them. I'm going to show you it's true, and I'm going to use you as an example. And he revives them. So what happened to these people? So some say it was temporary in nature. They took a few steps, they breathed, they said hi and goodbye. That was it. Got up, went right back down, and they died again. Another commentator maintains not true. They went on to go to Israel, and one of the rabbis said his parent tefillin was from his great-grandfather, who got it from an ancestor who was one of those that were revived. So Mechaye HaMeitim is one of the 13 principles that we see from Maimonides, and we have to accept that there's a higher essence and a higher reason that we're created for to live. Otherwise, if you don't believe in resurrection of the dead, and you don't believe the soul goes anywhere, just hovers around and hangs out with God, then we don't need a religion. You can live without any, and which is why some people don't believe. If somebody doesn't believe, why should they belong to any religion? They're going to live, which is, I live for today. I'm going to make myself happy. My body is my temple. Whatever I need to do, I'm going to do, and I'm going to live my life, and you live with no purpose. Last but not least, as we wrap up, it's time flies when we're having fun. The name of the bone primarily is in the back of the neck, where the revival is going to come from. And the name of the bone is called the luz bone. And that bone is going to be the primary bone that the body is going to be built around. And ultimately, when the Messiah comes, we're going to have a revival of the dead. So the last point I'll clarify you as we wrap up tonight, if somebody has a former soul in them, then whose body gets revived? What do you say? So based upon this idea that we established tonight, that there are 5 levels of the soul, only a portion of one of those levels are in the person. And therefore, it's not a conflict. The primary soul that's in the person is going to come back to that person. I'll give you one last example we see with Moses. When Moses first encounters God at the burning bush, what does he do? What's his first reaction when God starts talking, which is basically what you see there? That's the insignia of the conservative movement, which is a snebo air. The bush is burning, the bush is on fire, but not burning. First thing Moshe does is he looks away. He won't look at God's presence. Unlike when we see with Cain, Abel. Hevel, when he saw God, remember each brother brings a sacrifice? And one is so upset that God accepted his brothers, he murders him. That's the first murder in the Torah. But when the fire comes down, he gazed at God's presence. He kept on looking at the fire, he didn't turn away. So Kabbalistic rabbis say that Moshe has a piece in him of Hevel. And when he looked away from the bush, he immediately rectified the sin that the original Saul committed years ago by gazing at God's presence. So just as a little teaser for next week, we're going to speak about Kaddish, the death and the departure of the soul. And we're going to have a lot of different discussions about basically how to elevate the soul, how the soul hovers, and last but not least, visitation of graves, which is a very big concept in our religion, where people go to graves, not just your family members, they go throughout the world. They go to holy people's graves and praying at the graves and what that achieves. Now, just as a housekeeping, we're doing back to Tuesday night next week. This calendar-wise, there's a lot of things going on in the community. So Tuesday night at 7:30, and then the week after, because I think next week's Shechter's big fundraiser. On that note, have a very soulful Shabbat. Use it and listen to the inner voice. Thank you.